I'm Wendy, 31, female. I live in a quiet suburban town with my son, Josh. For the last 14 years, it's just been us. I work as an optician at a local clinic, a job that I love for its precision and the simple satisfaction of helping people see the world clearly. My own world, I thought, was just as clear. It revolved around my son, my work, and the comfortable, predictable life I had built for us. But a single phone call was about to prove that a mother can look at her own child every single day and still not truly see him at all. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon during a rare lull at the clinic. I was adjusting the frame on a pair of bifocals, enjoying the familiar, satisfying click as the tiny screw tightened. My phone buzzed on the counter, displaying a name I recognized but rarely spoke to. Karen, the mother of Josh's friend, Liam. My stomach did a little flip. Calls from other parents usually meant one of two things: a last-minute carpool request or trouble. "Hi, Karen. Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Her reply was hesitant, laced with an anxiety that immediately put me on edge. "Wendy, hi. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be calling if I wasn't really worried. It's about Josh." My heart hammered against my ribs. Josh, is he hurt? Did something happen at school? My mind raced through a dozen terrible scenarios, each one worse than the last. No, nothing like that. He's fine physically, she said quickly, as if realizing the panic she'd induced. "It's something else. Something Liam told me. And honestly, I debated whether to call you at all, because I know how kids can exaggerate, but this felt different." I leaned against the counter, my work forgotten. "Karen, please, just tell me what's going on." She took a deep breath. "Liam has been spending a lot of his allowance on an online game they all play. At first, I didn't think much of it, but we're talking hundreds of dollars over the last few months. When I finally confronted him, he broke down. He said he was buying special items and upgrades from another player. I was confused. Okay, I'm not sure I see what this has to do with Josh, the player he's been buying from. Karen said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, the one who has been pressuring him, telling him he'll be kicked off the team if he doesn't buy the latest upgrade. Liam says it's Josh. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I actually laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. "Josh, Karen, that's impossible. Josh doesn't have the time for one. His grades are perfect. He's on the soccer team. He helps me around the house. He's a good kid. There must be a mistake. Maybe someone is using his name." "That's what I thought, too," she admitted. "But Liam showed me the account name, Optical Prime. You work in optics, Wendy. It just seemed too specific, and he described how the seller knew things like what street Liam lived on. Liam is convinced it's him. He said Josh is doing this to other kids in their circle, too." I felt a cold anger rising in my chest, directed not at my son, but at this woman accusing him. "Karen, with all due respect, my son is not some kind of digital extortionist. He gets a modest allowance. He wouldn't know the first thing about setting something like that up. I think Liam is just looking for someone to blame for spending all his money." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with her disappointment. "Okay, Wendy," she said softly. "I understand. I thought you should know. As a mother, I would want to know." The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear, the accusation echoing in the quiet room. Optical Prime. It was ridiculous. A coincidence. Josh was a good kid. He was my son. I knew him. He was kind, thoughtful, and responsible. He was everything a single mother who'd had her child at 17 could ever hope for. He was my success story. But as I drove home that evening, Karen's words played on a loop in my mind. A whisper of doubt had been planted, a tiny, poisonous seed in the perfect garden of my life. I resolved to dismiss it, to trust the boy I had raised. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was now looking at my own life through the wrong prescription, and everything I thought was in sharp focus was actually blurry and distorted. That night, when Josh gave me his usual hug and asked about my day, I hugged him back tightly, searching his face for any sign of a stranger. I found nothing, and somehow that was the most unsettling part of all. I decided then I wouldn't confront him, not yet. First, I would just watch. For the next few days, I became a quiet observer in my own home. I told myself I was being silly, that I was letting another parent's paranoia infect me, but I couldn't help it. I watched Josh with a new, unsettling intensity, analyzing every word, every action, searching for cracks in the facade of the perfect son. On the surface, nothing had changed. He still completed his homework without being asked. His grades on the online school portal were flawless, and he was polite and helpful. He'd empty the dishwasher, take out the trash, and ask if I needed anything from the store. He was the model teenager, but my new, hyper-aware perspective started to notice things I'd previously overlooked. The way he angled his laptop screen away from me whenever I walked into the living room. The quick, almost reflexive flick of his thumb to change apps on his phone when I came near. I'd always chalked it up to a teenager's natural desire for privacy, but now it felt secretive, almost furtive. He had become fiercely protective of his devices, taking his phone into the bathroom and placing his laptop face down on his desk when he left his room. One evening, I was cooking dinner while he was in his room, supposedly studying for a history midterm. The house was quiet except for the sizzle of onions in the pan. On an impulse, I walked down the hall and stood by his closed door. I could hear the faint, rapid, fire clicking of his keyboard, far too fast and rhythmic for someone writing an essay about the Roman Empire. It was the sound of frantic messaging, or perhaps gaming. I knocked softly. The clicking stopped instantly. "Josh, dinner's in 10 minutes. I called out, "Okay, Mom, thanks." His voice replied, cheerful and untroubled. A moment later, I heard the distinct sound of a textbook being opened and a page being turned. The performance was seamless. It was for my benefit, and the realization sent a shiver down my spine. Who was this person in my house? The real turning point came that Friday. Josh had a soccer game, and I always made a point to attend. He was a decent player, not a star, but he was dedicated. As I sat in the bleachers, I saw Karen on the far side with her husband, cheering for Liam. She gave me a small, sad wave, which I awkwardly returned. Josh's team won. He was in high spirits on the drive home, chattering about a goal he'd almost scored. "Hey, let's celebrate," I said, trying to sound casual. "Pizza and a movie tonight. Awesome," he said. "Can I invite Liam over? We could play some Galaxy Titans after." My blood ran cold. Galaxy Titans. I didn't know the names of the games he played, but that one now sounded like a siren. "Sure, honey. That sounds like fun." My voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. Liam came over, and the boys disappeared into Josh's room after pizza. For an hour, I heard the sounds of typical teenage fun laughter, shouts of victory and defeat. It almost lulled me back into a sense of security. Maybe Karen was wrong. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. But then I heard a different sound, a heated, muffled argument. I crept down the hallway, my heart pounding, and pressed my ear against the door again. "Not fair, man. You said if I bought the Chrono Hammer, you'd put me on the main roster." It was Liam's voice, strained and upset. "I will." Josh's voice was low, cold, and completely devoid of the warmth he usually had. It was a voice I had never heard before. "When you prove you're a team player, the star. Facer just dropped. It's rare. You need it. Everyone else on the roster has it. But it costs $50. My mom took my allowance away." "That's not my problem, is it?" Josh replied coolly. "Find a way, or find a new team. Your choice." There was a moment of defeated silence before Liam mumbled, "Fine. I'll ask my grandma for the money." I backed away from the door, my hand covering my mouth to stifle a gasp. It was true, all of it. The boy in that room was not the son I knew. He was a manipulator, a bully, using friendship as leverage to squeeze money out of his peers. Optical Prime. The name suddenly made a sickening kind of sense. My son, the son of an optician, was helping his friends see their way to better gaming for a price. It was a dark, twisted inside joke. I stumbled back into the living room and sank onto the sofa, my body trembling. The perfect son was an illusion. The real Josh was a stranger, and he lived under my roof. The betrayal wasn't just that he was doing these horrible things. It was the depth of his deception. He had built a wall of good grades and polite manners so high that I had never thought to look over it. Now I knew I had to. I had to see what else was hiding in the shadows. After Liam went home and Josh was asleep, the house fell into a profound silence that felt mocking. Every tick of the clock seemed to count down the seconds of my ignorance. I knew I had to act, but the thought of confronting him with what I'd overheard felt premature. He was a skilled liar, a performer. He would deny it, twist the story, and make me feel like the crazy, overbearing mother. He would lock down his digital life even further, and I would lose any chance of understanding the true scope of this. I needed proof, hard, undeniable proof. My first target was the family computer in the living room. Josh rarely used it, preferring his own laptop, but but I knew his school and email accounts were likely saved on it. With trembling hands, I sat down and clicked on the web browser. His school email was the first saved login. My heart pounded as I accessed it, feeling like a trespasser in my own son's life. I scrolled through emails from teachers and school announcements, finding nothing. It was clean, pristine, of course it was. This was his public face. Then I checked the browser history. Page after page of research on the Roman Empire, articles on soccer drills, and links to educational videos. It was the digital footprint of a model student. I was about to give up when a thought struck me. Josh was smart. He would know how to clear his history, but people get lazy. They forget things. I opened the browser's settings and went to the saved passwords section. My breath hitched. There were dozens of them. Logins for his school portal, for forums about soccer, for music streaming services, and then, nestled among them, were several I didn't recognize. Usernames for gaming platforms, payment processing sites, and one email address that wasn't a school account. It was a generic address from a free email provider, primeoptical11@email.com. It was a slight variation of the name Karen had mentioned, but it was too close to be a coincidence. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I tried to log into the email account. It asked for a password. I typed in our dog's name, access denied, our street name, access denied, my birthday, his father's name. Nothing worked. Then I saw the forgot password link. I clicked it, my hopes sinking as I realized the recovery email would be sent to his phone. But then it offered another option, answer a security question. The question appeared on the screen. What was the name of your first pet? And my heart leaped. His first pet was a goldfish we'd won at a school fair when he was 6. He had named it Captain Finn. I typed it in, my fingers fumbling on the keys. A new screen loaded. Create a new password. I was in. The inbox was a digital Pandora's box. There were dozens of emails from a payment service, notifications of funds received, $20 here, $50 there, another $30. It was a steady stream of small transactions, adding up to thousands of dollars over the past year. The sender names were just usernames, but a few of them I recognized from the soccer team roster. Liam's username was there, over and over again. Then I saw the other emails. They were from the Galaxy Titans game administrators, warnings about unethical trade practices. One email, sent 2 months ago, was a final warning, threatening to ban the account for exploiting junior players and creating a toxic in-game economy. So the game developers knew he had been flagged. But he had clearly found a way around it. The worst discovery was in the drafts folder. There were message templates, pre-written scripts for him to copy and paste to different kids. They were masterpieces of manipulation, a chilling blend of friendly encouragement and subtle threats. One read, "Hey man, saw you were struggling in the last quest. The new star. Facer would really help you level up. All the top players are using it. Let me know if you want in on the exclusive deal, but it ends tonight." Another was more sinister. "Heard you told someone you couldn't afford the upgrade. That's too bad. The guild leader is looking to cut players who aren't pulling their weight. Wouldn't want you to lose your spot, just saying." He was running a sophisticated, predatory business. He identified a need, status, and acceptance within their social gaming circle, and exploited it for profit. He used peer pressure as his weapon and his friends as his customers. He had turned their childhood hobby into his own personal ATM. I felt physically ill. I printed everything. The payment receipts, the warnings from the game, the manipulative message templates. I saved them to a USB drive and meticulously cleared the browser history on the family computer, deleting the new password I had created. I needed to cover my tracks. This was no longer just about a mother's suspicion. This was an investigation. I had the digital breadcrumbs. Now I needed to follow the trail out of the virtual world and into the real one. I had to understand where the money was going and just how deep this deception ran. The stack of printed emails felt like a toxic object on my nightstand. For 2 days, I barely slept, my mind racing. I knew what Josh was doing, but I didn't fully understand the how or the why. Where was the money going? A 14-year-old with thousands of dollars would surely leave a trail. I started by doing a quiet but thorough search of his room while he was at school. I felt like a criminal, my hands shaking as I opened drawers and looked under his bed. I found no hidden stashes of cash, no new expensive clothes or gadgets beyond what I had bought for him. It was baffling. The money wasn't being spent on physical things, which meant it had to be digital. But what was he buying? The answer, I suspected, was beyond my technical expertise. I needed help. My first instinct was to call Karen, but I hesitated. This was my mess to handle, and I wasn't ready to admit to her that she had been right all along. Then I thought of David. My colleague, Dr. David Chen, was the head optometrist at our clinic. He was a few years older than me, calm, logical, and incredibly discreet. We weren't close friends outside of work, but I trusted him. He had a way of looking at a problem from all angles, much like he would examine a patient's eyes until he found the precise issue. The next day at lunch, I asked if we could talk in his office. I closed the door behind me and simply laid a few of the printed emails on his desk. "This is about my son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. David read them in silence, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. He didn't say, "I told you so," or offer platitudes. He just listened intently as I recounted everything, from Karen's phone call to my discovery in his email drafts. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Wendy, this is heavy. I'm so sorry you're going through this." He tapped a finger on one of the payment receipts. "This is sophisticated for a 14-year-old. He's not just taking their money. He's laundering it through in-game currency and these payment platforms. The question is, where is it ending up? I have no idea," I confessed. "There's no sign of it. He might be converting it to cryptocurrency," David suggested, "or funneling it into other online accounts. It's easy to hide money online if you know what you're doing." He saw the look of despair on my face and softened his tone. "We need someone who understands that world. Do you know any of the other parents, the ones whose kids are listed in these transactions?" His question sparked an idea. One of the usernames on the payment list, Cybernaut9, had been a frequent customer. I remembered from the soccer roster that the player was a boy named Sam. His father, Mark, had his profession listed next to his name on the team contact sheet, IT consultant. It was a long shot, but he was my best hope. Taking that step was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. It meant admitting my son was preying on his child. That evening, I found Mark's number and called him. I introduced myself as Josh's mom, and with a trembling voice, explained that I had discovered some troubling online financial activity involving our sons. I braced myself for anger, for accusations. Instead, Mark was quiet for a moment before sighing heavily. "Thank you for calling me, Wendy. We've noticed a lot of money missing from our son's debit card, the one we give him for lunch money. He kept saying he was losing it. We grounded him, we took away his privileges. We never imagined this." His reaction, one of shared parental pain rather than blame, broke down the wall I had built around myself. I told him everything. "Can you send me the usernames and transaction IDs?" he asked, his voice now shifting into professional mode. "My son's username is in there. With his permission, I can use it to look at the transaction history from his side. We might be able to trace where the funds were ultimately transferred." I forwarded him the files. 2 hours later, he called back. "Okay, Wendy, I've got something. It's clever. Your son wasn't cashing out. He was using the money from the kids to buy assets in a different, much more adult-oriented online investment game. He was buying and selling stocks, currencies. Basically, he created a network of unwilling investors, his friends, to fund his own virtual portfolio. A portfolio? Why would a 14-year-old do that?" I asked, completely stunned. "Status, I guess," Mark said grimly. "Bragging rights, or maybe he thought he could become a millionaire before he graduated high school. The thing is, he's good at it. The account is up nearly 40%, but he funded it by manipulating children. He stole from them, including my son." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't about buying things. It was about power. It was about proving how smart he was, building a secret empire where he was the king. He had created a persona, optical prime, that was everything he perhaps felt he wasn't in real life: powerful, cunning, and in control. "What do we do?" I whispered, the weight of it all crushing me. "First," Mark said, his voice firm and clear, "we don't let him get away with it. We need a plan. He needs to understand the real-world consequences of his virtual actions, and he needs to pay back every single cent." I finally had a partner. I wasn't alone anymore. The dots were connected, the picture laid bare. It was uglier than I could have imagined, but now at least I could see the path forward. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to save my son from the person he was becoming. The next few days were a blur of hushed phone calls and covert planning with Mark. David served as my moral compass, reminding me that the goal wasn't to destroy Josh, but to guide him back to the right path, however painful that process might be. We quickly dismissed the idea of going to the police. A criminal record would irrevocably damage Josh's future. This required a parent's justice, not the court's. Mark, with his calm, methodical IT brain, came up with the name for our strategy, the controlled burn. In forest management, he explained over the phone, you sometimes have to burn away the diseased undergrowth to save the healthy trees. We need to burn down Josh's entire digital operation, but in a way that we control, so he can learn from the ashes. The plan had 3 phases. Phase 1 was containment. Mark, using his technical skills, worked with the Galaxy Titans game administrators. He provided them with the mountain of evidence we had collected, the transaction logs, the manipulative chat scripts, the list of affected players. He framed it as a parent seeking to protect the game's community. The administrators were horrified and cooperative. Within 24 hours, they suspended the Optical Prime account and launched a full investigation into its associated trade network. Simultaneously, they froze all the assets. The first wall of Josh's empire had crumbled. Phase 2 was financial reclamation. The investment game where Josh was building his portfolio was a legitimate, albeit unregulated, platform. Mark discovered that to withdraw any funds, a user had to verify their identity with a government-issued ID. Josh, being 14, couldn't possibly have one. He had built a fortune he could never access. His virtual money was trapped. Our plan was to make him face that reality. We would force him to liquidate his entire portfolio, and, with Mark's help guiding the technical side, transfer the exact amounts back to the payment accounts of every single child he had taken from. He wouldn't just be paying them back, he would have to perform the digital labor of returning every last stolen dollar himself. Phase 3 was the most important, the personal apology. This couldn't be a sterile digital transaction. Josh would have to face the kids he had manipulated. We decided to arrange a meeting mediated by Mark and me, where Josh would have to explain what he did and apologize to Liam and Sam in person. Karen and Mark's wife agreed it was the right course of action. They wanted their sons to see that actions have consequences and that bullies, even digital ones, are ultimately held accountable. The day we chose to set the plan in motion was a Saturday. I needed him to be home with no school or soccer to distract him. The morning felt unbearably tense. I made pancakes, just like any other Saturday, the forced domesticity a stark contrast to the storm that was about to break. Josh came into the kitchen, phone in hand, his face pale and his eyes wide with panic. "Mom, something's wrong with my game account," he said, his voice tight. It's been suspended. All my stuff is gone. It says it's for illicit trading. It must be a mistake, a glitch." I looked at him, my expression unreadable. "A glitch, that sounds serious," I said calmly, flipping a pancake. "Maybe you should try logging into your email. Perhaps they sent you a notification." I watched as he frantically typed on his phone. I saw the moment he found the email from the game administrators. The color drained from his face. He then navigated to his Prime Optical 11 account, the one he thought I knew nothing about. He must have seen the dozens of bounced payment notifications and the message from the investment platform about his locked account. His entire world was collapsing in real time, right in our kitchen. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, cornered fear. I don't understand what's happening," he stammered, though we both knew he was lying. I turned off the stove and sat down at the table across from him. I pushed a single piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of one of his coercive message templates. "I think you do, Josh," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. "I think it's time we talked about Optical Prime." The look on his face, the shock, the fear, the dawning horror of being caught, was something I would never forget. The controlled burn had begun. The undergrowth was catching fire, and my son was standing right in the middle of it. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Josh stared at the printed message template as if it were a venomous snake. The carefully constructed walls of his secret life had been breached, and he was left exposed and defenseless. His eyes darted from the paper to my face, searching for a hint of doubt, a crack in my resolve that he could exploit. He found none. Where did you get this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "That doesn't matter, Josh," I said, keeping my tone level. "What matters is that I know. I know about Galaxy Titans. I know about the accounts, the payments, and the investment portfolio. I know you've been taking money from your friends." He slumped in his chair, the fight draining out of him. The bravado of Optical Prime was gone, replaced by the terrified posture of a 14-year-old boy. "It wasn't like that," he mumbled, defaulting to denial. "It was just a game. We were just trading." "Was it a game when you threatened to have Liam kicked off the team if he didn't pay you?" I countered, my voice sharp with the pain of his betrayal. Was it a game when you took Sam's lunch money, week after week? This wasn't trading, Josh. This was manipulation. It was theft. Tears welled in his eyes and began to stream down his face. I was going to pay them back, he cried. Once my portfolio got big enough, I was going to pay everyone back and give them extra. I was good at it, Mom. I turned a few $100s into thousands. I was smart. His confession hit me harder than any lie could have. He wasn't just greedy, he was arrogant. He had a god complex, believing his intelligence gave him the right to use other people as pawns in his grand financial experiment. He genuinely didn't see the victims, he only saw the variables in his equation. Your intelligence doesn't give you a license to hurt people, I said, my voice softening slightly. The anger was still there, but it was now tempered by a profound sadness. This was my son, and I had failed to teach him the simple, fundamental difference between right and wrong. Being smart is worthless if you have no integrity, no empathy. I spent the next hour laying out the full picture for him. I showed him the complete transaction history, the total amount he had taken from each friend. I explained that Mark, Sam's father, had helped me uncover the entire scheme. The shame on his face intensified as he realized his actions hadn't just occurred in a digital void. They had real, world consequences that had pulled in other families. Then, I told him what was going to happen next. Your gaming and investment accounts are frozen, I stated. And you are going to liquidate every single asset. You will then personally transfer every cent back to the kids you took it from. Mark and I will supervise the entire process. Your laptop and phone are mine for the next 6 months. You will have a basic phone for emergencies and can use family computer for schoolwork with my supervision. He nodded, too broken to argue, and that's not all. I continued, taking a deep breath. This was the hardest part. Tomorrow you will go to Liam's house. You will sit down with him and with Sam, and you will apologize to them face to face. You will explain what you did and why it was wrong. There will be no excuses and no justifications. Karen and Mark will be there, and so will I. He looked up, his face a mask of horror. No, Mom, please. I can't. They'll hate me. Everyone will hate me. That is a consequence of your actions, I said firmly. Facing the people you hurt is part of making amends. You built this secret life in the shadows, acting tough behind a screen. Now you need to find the courage to be accountable in the light. This is not negotiable. The conversation lasted for hours. There were more tears, more weak justifications, and moments of raw, painful honesty. He talked about the pressure he felt to be successful, to be seen as more than just Wendy's quiet son. He had wanted to prove to me and to himself that he was brilliant and powerful. He had chosen a twisted, destructive path to do it. By the end of it, he was exhausted and emotionally empty. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow understanding of the damage he had caused. He wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a foolish, selfish boy who had let his ambition curdle into cruelty. It was the hardest conversation of my life, a brutal excavation of the rot that had grown in the heart of my family. But it was necessary. The fire had done its work. Now we had to see what, if anything, could grow back in its place. The next day was gray and overcast, a fitting backdrop for what felt like a funeral procession. The drive to Karen and Liam's house was silent. Josh sat beside me, pale and rigid, staring out the window. I had laid out his clothes for him, simple and neat, wanting him to present himself not as a villain, but as a young man ready to own his mistakes. When we arrived, everyone was already there, gathered in the living room. Mark and his wife sat with their son, Sam. Karen sat with Liam. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The boys, his friends, wouldn't look at him. I gave Josh a small, firm nod. This was his moment. He walked to the center of the room, his hands trembling. He took a shaky breath and began to speak, his voice barely a whisper at first. Liam, Sam, I'm sorry, he started, his eyes fixed on the floor. What I did was wrong. I took advantage of our friendship. I pressured you and I took your money, and there's no excuse for it. I thought it was just a game, that I was being smart, but I was just being a bully. I betrayed your trust, and I'm truly sorry. He looked up then, meeting Liam's eyes first, then Sam's. He recounted the specific things he'd done to each of them, proving he understood the personal nature of his betrayal. It wasn't a generic apology, it was a detailed confession. When he finished, the room was quiet. Liam, who had been hurt the most, finally spoke. Why, Josh, we were friends. I don't have a good reason. Josh answered honestly, his voice thick with unshed tears. I got caught up in trying to be someone important online. It doesn't make it right, it's what happened. Mark then stepped forward. We appreciate the apology, Josh, he said, his voice even. But an apology is just words. Actions are what matter now. That was the cue for the next phase. Over the following week, Josh, under my and Mark's strict supervision, spent hours at the computer. He liquidated his entire virtual portfolio. The number was staggering, far more than I had realized. Then, one by one, he initiated the transfers. He sent Liam back every dollar, and then did the same for Sam and a half dozen other kids he had scammed on a smaller scale. When he was done, his accounts were empty, but his penance wasn't just financial. His 6-month ban on personal electronics was absolute. Without the constant distraction of a screen, he was forced to re-engage with the world around him. At first, he was sullen and withdrawn, but slowly, something began to shift. He started reading the books that had gathered dust on his shelves. He and I started taking long walks in the evening, talking about everything and nothing. The conversations were awkward at first, but gradually we began to rebuild the connection that his secret life had severed. He got a job bussing tables at a local diner to earn his own money, a humbling experience that taught him the value of an honestly earned dollar. He rejoined the soccer team, but his dynamic with the other boys had changed. He wasn't a leader or an influencer anymore. He was just Josh, the quiet kid trying to earn his place back. Liam and Sam eventually started talking to him again, first with cautious nods, then with brief conversations. The friendship wasn't what it was, but it was a start. It has been over a year now. Josh got his laptop back, but with strict rules and monitoring software we both agreed on. His obsession with online status has been replaced by a quiet focus on his schoolwork and his job. He is saving money for a used car, and he is immensely proud of every dollar in his bank account. Our relationship is different now. The naive trust I once had is gone, replaced by something more resilient and honest. I no longer see him as my perfect son, my success story. I see him as a young man who made a terrible mistake and is slowly, painstakingly, working to become a better person. I learned that seeing clearly doesn't mean seeing what you want to see. It means looking at the truth, no matter how ugly it is, and finding the strength to fix what's broken. We are still picking up the pieces, my son and I, but for the first time in a long time, we are doing it together.